Welcome to Inclusive Conversations, Empowering Voices, a program celebrating and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, produced by the NSERC Create Programs, TABES, and Smart Art in association with the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University. I'm your host, Tim Hampton, and today's guest is Dr. Georgette Zinaty. Georgette is a leading voice in a wide variety of subjects, including leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Georgette is Chief of Staff at Myent. She is a two-time TEDx speaker and a Forbes contributor, and she has been recognized as one of 6 Canadian women empowering others, notably through the Women Helping Empower Women community she founded. Today, we are going to discuss the evolving landscape of leadership and the importance of creating a welcoming and fulfilling environment for everyone. Georgette, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
It's my delight. Thank you. Georgette, you recently took on this new role as Chief of Staff at Myent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What does Myent do and what will your role be?
Yeah, so Myent is actually a really fascinating company that's evolved and continues to evolve. So they actually have sort of different units within the organization. So there's Myent Corporation, and then within that there is Myent Health. So if you actually look into that, it's really quite fascinating. They do a lot of work around textile computing, digital health, but changing the game in a way that, nobody else is doing it. And it's a bit more complicated for me than just to say it's just a device, because it is definitely not a medical device. But if you can imagine taking whatever you're wearing, like an underwear bra, undershirt, and it has sensors that you can't feel. It's literally knitted into the material, and having that really track a lot of your information and uploaded that into an app where you can do you can do virtual visits. But the complexity and the level, it's a medical device, so that doesn't really exist on the market. Now you might think, well, why is that so special? And this is just one subsidiary, the many that they have, like the organization. But why you'd imagine if somebody is living in a remote place, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. Imagine a parent living far away. If your mom or dad were wearing one of these things and you were not really sure what was happening, they have created what they call the circle of care. So I can go on the app and I can see my dad is okay, or if he fell, did he really fall, or is it just something else? How is his heart rate today? How is his breathing today? All of these things. And if there's something wrong, the doctor can get involved. And so, because it's continuous, bidirectional, I can say, oh my God, dad said something was not feeling good Saturday at 12:30, in the afternoon. By the time you get to the doctor on Wednesday or Thursday, you're explaining what happened. They can actually go back in time and see what had happened. So that's just one part of it. They've got a veterinary arm. They've got Myent X, which is doing like some of the most amazing, technology coming. And then they have a research advancement part of the organization that's actually quite phenomenal. So they just bought out Xerox Research Center of Canada. So that's become Myent X. So we're talking deep, tech manufacturing, all of that. So they are really like the evolution end to end of thinking about innovation, technology, and so forth. So the company is about 200 plus people. And I have the privilege of working with the CEO, helping kind of to take that vision into the next level. It's my first week on the job. So come talk to me in a couple of years.
Well, that's fascinating. What is a chief of staff? I've only ever heard that term on the West Wing.
Yeah, so my role is going to be very interesting and evolving. So this is a brand new role created in the organization. So very much the right hand to the CEO. And our goal is to take some of these, strategies and visions and things and make them into reality. So how do I help them figure out how to do that? Some of that will be developing government relations. Some of that will be developing partnerships with academic institutions. Some of that will be developing processes and streamlining things so we become much more efficient and lean in terms of how we operate and proceed every single day. And some of it is identifying opportunities that maybe we're not necessarily seeing. And that's kind of, these are all strengths that I have from my previous work experiences.
I love it. Your LinkedIn profile, we were joking before the show about how I thought maybe you're doing 10 things at once. Your profile is packed with experiences and credentials. Is there a through line that connects them all? Is there a North Star that guides what you do, or is it serendipitous?
No, I think if you look, the commonality is there's purpose in everything that I do. And it very much is aligned with moving the dial and helping others kind of go from here to here. And that sort of is what makes me excited. And it's really actually why every time I come into a role, if I feel like I can make a difference, I say yes. If it's a job where I'm just making like a micro step in terms of my career and my abilities, that is probably not the right role for me. But if it's, this job is huge. I mean, there's going to be there's a shortage of things to do. So that to me is exciting. So steady state is kind of, it probably, if we were to get to steady state, I probably would be like, okay, I probably have to think about something else I need to do. But that's the part that actually really excites me. And it's being able to be of value. It's to be able to help others. It's to be able to kind of level up in some way. And that's the common thread with the things that I do.
Terrific. What led you to creating the Women Helping Empower Women community?
Yeah. So it's something I wanted to do for a long time. And when I was at the University of Toronto, I was a fundraiser. So I was always worried that if I created a nonprofit while I was raising money for the university, which is also considered to be a nonprofit, I know it's hard to believe. I didn't want anyone to say, oh, there's a conflict of interest. So I waited till I stepped down to create that. But in addition to it, my own experiences, in my career, and I had a fantastic career trajectory at the university. I mean, it didn't come easy. Like I worked, I hustled, I was constantly raising my own bar. And then when I was doing my research for my doctoral work, which is on the scarcity of women in leadership with a lens towards, the future of leadership with a DEI lens to it, I did qualitative work and quantitative. So the quant really reaffirmed what we know. Regardless. So I don't know if you are aware of my research, but I looked at 10,000 graduates, same academic institution, over a 50-year period across 26 sectors in Canada. And I looked at a bunch of data points within that, right? So it was like a huge undertaking. When we did all the analysis, we realized that it didn't matter which sector you were in. Women were always, despite the fact that in the last 25 years had more degrees and multiple degrees compared to their male counterparts, they were still never in the sort of the top positions, rarely, even in sectors like education, where women were 75% of that pool that I was looking at. So then I said, okay, but some of them do actually make it. So why is it this person makes it and this person hovers below? And that's when I did qualitative interviews, deep dive. And again, that itself could have been a thesis. So the aha moment was, the questions, if you do qualitative work, they have to be open-ended. Like I can't direct you to where I want you to go. And it was sort of like, did anything ever hold you back? And a lot of the answers from the women were other women. And I was like, oh, I thought they would say men, they would say institutional bias, they would say having 3 kids. No. And so that was, a bit of an aha moment for me, because that was my experience, but I thought it was just me that was experiencing that. So and again, you have to remember, like, when your career is doing this and maybe other people's is, that I'm sort of thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? And then I realized I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was, and in some ways it's what I call female misogyny, right? It's women not really supporting other women. So I said to myself, I'm going to change the game. I want to make sure that I start educating. It's when I created WOO, I thought, well, okay, it's going to probably be women who are 18 to 25. I can help formulate their thinking. I can get them thinking about, why it is them, why it's important to lift each other, why it's important to support one another, why we can actually create a whole other movement in terms of where we are to where we want to go and what we can do about that. And that's actually how it started. Then our membership is 18 to like 65.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Okay. So speaking of credentials and also your time at university, I mean, you have, I think 4 degrees, or am I counting wrong?
4 degrees and a certificate.
4 degrees and a certificate. You've also done research. You've also been an academic administrator. So few people are more aware of what the education system is like.
Yeah.
Is the way we educate people today fit for purpose in a rapidly changing world?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, I actually just had done a recent interview, and it was a CEO of a very successful CEO. And he said to me, I don't know that degrees matter as much as, finding someone who is willing to learn. And I actually don't disagree. I'm going to say, I think degrees matter. So I'll tell you, when I worked in an academic institution and you work in when you apply for jobs, there's a minimum requirement. And for some jobs, they'll say we need a minimum master's because it's an academic institution. That was the only way to move up, was to get the degree. So that was important. But I actually really like learning. And I remember when I did my MBA, interestingly enough, I started the university did pay for it. Like my husband, I remember sitting with my husband and going, we're not going to be able to buy a car for a little while if I do this, right? But right when I started it,
We'll have a nicer car later.
yeah, we have a nicer car later. But when I started it, I remember the VP of HR coming back to me and saying, listen, we're going to have this leadership program if you're interested, but it was going to be a master's in like whatever it was, leadership or something at the time. And I remember thinking, that's great. But if I ever left the university, an MBA will get me way further than a master's in whatever it was. Like masters of education are great if you're in academia, but if you're outside of that, that's not going to get you a job on Bay Street or somewhere else. So I was a bit more practical with my first degree. And then when I remember wanting to finish my second degree, it was, that's why I did it. But that all being said, whenever I've interviewed or hired people, I would say I've always doubled down on what I'm going to call potential. Like you can have all the degrees in the world. If you don't have a growth mindset, you are not going to be able to do anything and solve problems. You're going to think very linear, like, this is how I do it. This is the process. And that's great. It means you're really smart, both smart. What I really admire are people who are going to go in and rethink a problem. And you don't need to have a PhD or a doctorate for that, right? You just need to be really creative, have an open mindset, have some skills to be able to kind of be open to learning. And that potential is, I think, someone's biggest strength in many ways. Because that if I can teach you or you're willing to learn, you can do anything.
Sorry, let me, oh yes, sorry. I wanted to ask, because you've accomplished so much in life and you clearly have a lot of drive. Have you had a mentor along the way, or who has been your inspiration?
So interestingly, I don't know that I've had a mentor. I've had many wonderful people that I've worked with that have been I'm going to say my champions, given me opportunities. My inspiration is actually my kids. When we came to Canada, we were immigrants. I was like the first to go to university in our family. So for me, I wanted to very much show my kids, you can do anything. And as your mom, and by old age, I'm going back to school again and again, and keeping down a full-time job and meeting all those goals. And I was commuting. I mean, I live in Mississauga, and I was commuting to Scarborough, to Morningside in the 401. If I can do all of that, meet the goals, and still like do the dishes and clean the toilets, then you can do anything. You can do it, So I'm not suggesting that you have to do all of that, but if I can do all of that, then each of them can. And I wanted them to raise their own personal bar, but also be very proud of, who their mom is and, where we are. And I also, to be honest with you, wanted to give them a great life. Like I wanted to set them up. And so all the things that I do, it's because I want my children to be happy and to have great opportunities and to be able to kind of level up themselves and see that. And I hope that they see their mom as a role model, because that to me is the biggest, it's a big gift if they can see that and be proud.
So there's a common thread there that you're hoping to empower your children. You're also hoping to empower other women. Empowering gives people the ability to pursue what they want, but the trick is to know what your life purpose is. How do you advise people to find that if they don't know?
That's all. I literally got this question yesterday. I was at an event and speaking. And so I find people find it hard to figure out what that is. And so what I would say to people is, I want you to think about what makes you happy. Okay. So when you think about your purpose, there are times where you are just like in your element, whether it's something you're doing at work or there's something you're volunteering in and you're liking, I'm really like, you are like inside here in your heart, you're feeling joy. You need to write that down, right? But part of it is journaling and part of it is writing it down, kind of saying, well, what's the common thread that fills me up and lights me up? And when you figure that out, that is going to be your purpose and North Star. Now, some people say, well, I don't know if I can make money doing that. And that's the question I got yesterday. So I said to this person, like, what is it that you really like doing? He said, well, I volunteer here, I volunteer at my church, I volunteer. And I really, really enjoy like the event part. And I said, okay, so why don't you move into event planning? He said, oh no, I can't do that. Like, it's just like, there's not enough money in it. So I said, okay, don't give up your day job. Start a side hustle. Test it out. See if you like it. See if, volunteering is one thing, but if you're running it as your own side business, try it. And if it takes off, you've got two different streams and you're opening up career paths. If not, you're going to stay exactly where you are, clocking in, clocking out, and you're not going to be happy. So try it out. I mean, a little business, maybe it takes off, maybe it doesn't, but if you don't know, you don't know. You don't ask, you don't get. So it was sort of like, oh, okay, maybe. And I'm like, so where I'm actually going to be meeting with him to talk a little bit more about what that might look like. But I think it's very important for people to think about, well, what is it that fills me up? And I'll tell you when I actually knew this was the work I was going to be doing. So when I was at the university and doing deep into my research, we created a program. It was a leader to leader program, right? It was a women leadership program. And we were lucky enough to have somebody fund the program for us, an alumni. And I remember developing, it was 6 modules, once a month. We gave them things to journal, we brought in speakers, everything. And at the end, I wanted them to fill out, surveys. And I remember, the gentleman that was working with me, I said to him, I'd like to get a sense of like how people thought. I remember it was 10 o'clock at night. I was sitting in the car in the parking lot. And I remember really wanting to read the feedback because I was nervous. Like, did I do this right? Because it was very much like gut instinct on how we develop it. And I was crying reading the comments because people were like, Dr. Dr. Georgette changed my life. She got me to rethinking this. And I thought, it was like, if you give me $1 million, the joy and my heart was so full. Like it wouldn't have mattered. Like, I don't want that was like, and I knew then that's like where I need to be. That's the space like that. I was feeling fulfillment. I was feeling joy. I was feeling things I'd never felt. And I thought, I need to do more of this work.
So I think that may segue into this question. The intention to embrace all people fairly and inclusively can be described in many ways. I've heard the term equity, diversity, inclusion, or there's decolonization, equity, diversity, inclusion. There's diversity, inclusion, equity. You use, I think, what did you call it? DIE?
DIE, yeah, and belonging, right? Yeah.
Right. So there's many ways to describe it. You add the term belonging to the list. What is the distinction you're hoping to make there?
Yeah. So, I think when we talk about diversity, and often, I use this quote from a professor from Harvard, he says, diversity is counting the numbers, inclusion is making the numbers count. Whenever I do presentations, I always begin with that statement. And you might think, well, it seems simple enough. It does at face value. But when you look at, say, the GTA, like the Toronto area or Vancouver, New York, whatever, there's diversity. Everywhere you look, like there's people that look different. So you could have that in a company that's ticking off the box. Inclusion is, where are these people in the organization? Are they all in the entry-level jobs? Are they in senior leadership positions? Are they sitting at the tables that matter? Are their voices actually heard, right? And belonging is where you can come into work and be yourself and not wanting to hide whatever it is about you, right? So feeling like you can show up, be respected, be seen, be heard, and feel like you're in a safe space to do that. And those two pieces are much harder. It's easy to get the diversity. We can talk about inclusion, and even, when I talk about it, I think, well, you can have policies that talk about this is how we need to be inclusive. So, I say policies don't change minds. They keep people in check, right? So the policies are there so that you don't cross the line. But I don't know what you might do when the doors close and nobody can see. So they literally keep you in check. We have to change mindsets. We have to change how we think. And that requires a lot of work. I mean, sometimes when I do diversity, equity, inclusion training, people think, oh, we've done this workshop. Yay. And I'm thinking, do you really think we just flipped the switch? We just started the conversation. There are aha moments that happen, but we just began the conversation and got people thinking, but you need to keep doing that to change behavior. It takes time.
How do universities and colleges approach equity, diversity, and inclusion differently from private companies? Have you seen a difference there?
I think it's a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. It's because, companies, it's their employees, and it's kind of almost, I'm going to say, outward facing, right? It's kind of, and for some companies, it's their, corporate social responsibility, metric. And for a lot of companies, sometimes the DEI piece for senior leaders is tied to performance. Some companies do, not all. I don't know that universities are actually, tying the senior leadership, performance to DEI and DEI metrics. But also the difference is, the student bodies have changed, right? The student body makeup and diversification has changed. So when I think about when I was in school, decades ago, I'm not going to tell you what year because I'm really going to timestamp myself. That has like really time myself. That has changed, right? That has changed. And so like, I remember being at the executive table where there was a question, there was a whole thing about how do we accommodate students who have to go pray in the middle of, of an exam. Well, what's the policy on that? And we'd never dealt with that before, right? So the university is constantly evolving in terms of wanting to address things. And they want to, I think, land on the right side of things. But I think there's a lot of thinking and pausing, thinking, well, when we do and precedent, right? When we do and precedent, if you do for this group, what does that mean? But I think they aim to do the right thing. Do they serve all the students in the ways that they want to serve? I'm not sure. But I think the intention is right. I think where they could do better is the representation in senior leadership roles. I think should be a lot more diversified. Certainly that, when I looked around, and my own background is like, because of my ethnicity, we fit into the BIPOC population, although I recognize I'm very not BIPOC looking. But I would say that when you move up in organizations, it's not as diverse as it could be or should.
Does remote work hinder or foster inclusivity and diversity in the workplace?
I think it depends on the organization. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And so a lot of people work remotely. I worked remotely for a really long time. I think it's nice when you do this, but there's nothing that beats human connection. And so as nice as this is, like if I saw you might go, hey, Georgette, and there's a hug and you can feel the body language, you can feel the energy, right? So there's that. But also I think when you are looking at problems and problem solving and being creative, there's a different kind of dynamic when you can, like, I'm just thinking about the office here, like we're all back to work here, but there's like a little area here where it's like people sometimes will sit and just bounce ideas about how we're going to solve a problem. Getting people on Zoom, I don't know that it happens as much, maybe, but not all problems can be solved in a little box. We're looking at each other. Sometimes you have to kind of try things out. You have to physically be there depending on the work that you do. So I think for companies, what they need to do is, if they are going to do a hybrid thing, is when people are in the office, how are you managing that hybrid time, right? So is everyone just sitting in a cubby and they've shown up? Again, ticking off the box, right? Tim's in, Georgette's in, so we're physically here. That's nice. So you forced me to log in for 2 hours in traffic, whatever. Or are we thinking strategically, if we're going to have employees in this afternoon, how do we create a dynamic for creativity, for thinking, for innovation, for connection in a way? How do we create maybe projects where people can come together, do something, and then go back and do their own thing on their own time? Those are the things that I think about it.
How should organizations measure the success of their DEI efforts?
So that depends on every organization and what they want to measure. So I always say, are you measuring what matters? Because I can tell you there's over 100 things that people can measure if they really want to. The reality is most companies can't measure that. They don't have the resources. They don't have the tools. They don't have the talent. And not everything needs to be measured. So I often, and it's also overwhelming. So I'll tell you, sometimes the adaptation of, the DEI stuff, the challenge that people have is it's too much, right? And it's like, I don't know where to begin, and companies will get lost. Or they'll say, well, we have this many women, this many people of color, and this. And I'm thinking, well, that's just a number. Like, that's great. Now, how are we sort of moving that along? What's the strategy piece? So I often say you have to think about, what is it you want to measure that is aligned with your values and your strategy as a company? Because that's important. And then how are you going to measure it? And what does success look like for you? And the question then is how do we, and when I talk to companies, I'm like, what does year 1 look like? What does year 2 look like? What does year 3? And how to build on that. So it doesn't have to be 20 things. It can even be 5, right? But if you can do 5 good things, you're going to build momentum, you're going to build buy-in, and people can see it. So it's not like, oh, we have a policy, we have an ERG, an employee resource group, like we did that. I'm like, okay, that's really great. Again, you have the box, those are easy to do. Let's talk about something maybe slightly harder. If you're going to do a survey and there's an outcome from the survey, okay, between, if we do that January, 15th, we get the survey results in April or May, what does that look like for us by the end of December? What are we willing to commit to? That's progress. Not we're going to have a survey and then we'll implement some of those strategies. That's, going on the 4-1, don't know where I'm going, but I'm going.
When you have inclusion that embraces groups that are at odds with one another, how can an institution handle that in a way that is fair to both groups?
Yeah. So, we're living in really challenging times right now. And, we're seeing a lot of interesting things play out. I think when I think about that, I think about, first of all, we need to make sure that people have what I'm going to call psychological safety. So that means that people should have the space to be able to talk about their opinions in a way that is not, tearing down somebody else. But, everyone's going to have a lived experience. I have a lived experience, Ted. You have a lived experience. So if our experiences are at odds, I can guarantee you that if you and I were to sit down and actually have a thoughtful conversation, we would have much more in common than not. And, what's interesting is when I do the DEI training, I use these different tools, and one of them is talking about similarities and differences. And whenever I do this, people just love it. Like, they love this. But the reality is they end up talking, and I'll say, okay, we put them in groups, come back, and I say, okay, so tell me. Both Tim and I are this, and we both did this. And, what's really interesting is here are the differences, but the differences they're giggling about, right? And I think if we were to get to a place where we can actually get these opposing in air quotes, sides together and say, well, what are the differences, but what are the similarities? My sense is our similarities, we all would care about humanity. We all care about, the future for ourselves and for our children and the next generation. I think the reality is nobody really wants war. Who wants war? Like, do I go, and who wakes up and says, I want to just go in and just tear it? So I think there is some, we need to get to the humanity piece a bit more, the listening piece. I think the other part is, we cannot change the past, but we could definitely work together to change what the future is going to look like for the next generation. And we can choose to do that, or we could choose to stay where we are and keep looking in the back mirror. And I think for many organizations and institutions, creating that safe space, creating that there's more sides. There's never two sides to any story. The world is not black and white. It's gray. There's a lot of gray, lots of shades. And so I think it's just being able to recognize that we want to make sure that people are heard and respected, because that is how you're going to get buy-in from either side to get to stay in the middle ground. And if it's one or the other, then, if you're not actively including, you're accidentally, excluding. And when people are excluded, they feel marginalized. They don't feel like they belong. And then there's all the other stuff that comes up, right? The anger, the frustration, they're not being heard, they're not being seen. And then you're killing your DEI and inclusion strategy.
Thank you. You have created your own organizations and joined existing organizations. What are your thoughts on the different challenges facing an entrepreneur and someone making a change inside an organization, an intrapreneur?
Yeah, so I've created my own for sure. And I will tell you, even that has evolved. Like, when I think about starting Women Helping Empower Women, I had this vision for it, we got a board together, and it was in the middle of COVID. So, everything was online, and that was great. We got lots of tons of momentum. But I also realized earlier, I would say later last year, there's a lot of organizations that do stuff with women and for different groups and marginalized groups. So how are we different? What was so special about us? And I think that is what I would say people need to think about if you're an entrepreneur. Like, what's your unique value proposition? What makes you so special? Where's the added value that you're creating? Because anybody can be part of a women's group. There's tons of, or whatever other organization. Are you selling a widget or are you selling an experience? Right? Are you selling, what is it that you're doing? Why would someone come to me? And, for me, when I thought about that, and I thought about that a lot, part of what I realized was kind of core to my values and who I am was always about helping others and accessibility. So what we did with our organization is, there's lots of and I'm not putting any down, just to be clear. But, there's what I'm going to call an entry point, right? Like, if there's recognition programs, there's a high price ticket item. And I sort of decided that if you can afford that, there was, I think, one event that I saw it was like $1,500 for 2 days to attend the one event and the next event and that, like, the pre-party and the post-party. And I thought, okay, well, if you have that kind of money, plus the outfit and the hair and the, the nails and the babysitting for the kids and the parking, you're in it close to $2,000, you don't need my help. That's not the group I'm helping. You're doing fine, right? They're just reaffirming your success. What I want to do is help the people that don't have that, I want to help make those introductions. I want to open the doors. So we really focus on supporting those who need the help. And we open doors, we create capacity, we build, we make it, we sponsor, we mentor, we do all of these things. We provide programming that you pay a ton of money for like nothing, very minimal. And so that really was how I decided that was kind of our core unique value proposition. And there's a lot less people doing that part.
So, how can leaders balance the drive for innovation and the need to maintain stability and continuity in that organization?
So I'm going to say, how do you define stability and continuity? Because change is the only constant. So if stability and continuity means that you're bringing in a certain amount of money every month, or you have the same number of staff, okay. Is that how you're defining it? I don't know. But to me, for innovation, creativity to happen means that we have to be leveling up constantly and thinking, not where do we want to be by the end of this next quarter? Where do we want to be in the next year or two? I'm not even going to say 5 years, because so many things could change. Like, and the reason I say that is, like, think about, what happened with COVID. How many people were ready to pivot, right? Yeah. So the companies that survived and thrived were the ones that were innovative enough to pivot. Anybody who didn't, flatlined, right? Or they were gone. And so this is the thing that I think that's really important, is to think about what does innovation actually mean for you? So is innovation is like the little thing, the little technology you're creating, or is innovation part of your culture, part of the DNA, part of this nimbleness that you want to do? And if you can build that into the organization, then you are going to thrive regardless of what comes at you.
Terrific. Okay, this is the last question, Georgette. This has been amazing and really fast. Like I've enjoyed speaking with you. Last question is, looking ahead, what do you think will be the biggest challenges and opportunities for leaders?
Mm. So I think there's going to be a few. I think part of it is going to be thinking about, like, they're really going to have to think about the future of leadership, what that means. And to me, that actually means being more inclusive. Like, look, our world is changing. I mean, if you think about even 15 years ago, I'm not even going to say 30, I'm going to say 15 years ago, we had LGBTQ and we were dealing, people were educating and learning more. Now we're talking about people transitioning in the workplace. We never talked about that 15 years ago. It happened for sure, but that was not, I've had you create safe spaces for people. So we didn't talk about pronouns other than, it was just two genders, right? So it's important for us to think about that. Leaders have to really understand inclusion, DEI, and what that means, and how to make a space safe and people belong. So that's one. Two, I think the innovation agenda in Canada needs to change. I don't think it is as solid as it is. We talk about innovation. We talk about going to the next level. I worked at a university, that word was used constantly. And I remember driving home thinking, people even know what does that even mean? Like, just because you say it doesn't mean you're doing it. So what does that actually look like? And to me, that actually gets people, it means we have to change how we are educating people. It means we have to change about how we're pushing people's thinking and this young people in terms of the creativity piece of it, in terms of, like, I remember being at U of T and a professor being quite upset about the fact that he did this, he gave them this test. And, more than 80% of the students, the answer made absolutely no sense, but it was what came up on the calculator. And that's, and he was like, no one was saying that doesn't make any sense, right? So how can that be the answer? And so it was just that logic, that sense of critical thinking was in there. So I think we need to develop a little bit more of that. And and leaders and organizations need to create spaces for employees to be able to do that. And I don't think we do that. We tend to say, this is your job, stay in that lane. So really fascinating organizations. I think, where was I? In Silicon Valley. And I remember saying to this guy, what is it that you do? And he said, well, they don't have job descriptions. They hire them on skill sets. And then what happens is they come in and they're part of projects, and then they move around. So imagine that it's not like, this is my job, I come in and this is the 9 to 5. It's like, here's my skill and I can be here, I can be here. So imagine how exciting and innovative that is. But you have to be willing to go into a space like that and be comfortable, because you're working based on skill, not based on this is outside the scope of my job, I can't do it, right? You have to be willing to embrace it all. And so, but I do think that is going to be the future of workplaces, innovative workplaces.
Fascinating. My guest today was Dr. Georgette Zinaty. Thank you, Georgette, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully you agree with my innovation agenda.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thank you for listening to Inclusive Conversations, Empowering Voices, a program celebrating and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion. Produced by the NSERC Create Programs, TABES, and Smart Art, in association with the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University.